I'm joined by epidemiologist and cardiologist Dr. Christopher Labos. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about keeping safe over Thanksgiving, the first sort of sit-down meal holiday since most Quebecers are fully vaccinated. What would you say is the best way to keep things safe when gathering with family at this time?
Well, the most important thing is that if you can make sure that everybody around the dining room table is double vaccinated, that's going to provide the best protection that you possibly can, because the risk of somebody being sick and then passing the virus on to others is significantly reduced if everybody at the table is fully vaccinated.
What are the do's and don'ts of gathering and the things to keep in mind when sitting down and having a meal with multiple people?
So I think that even though the situation is obviously better now than it was a year ago, the most important thing is keep the gatherings small. If the weather cooperates, and it looks like it might, eating outside is obviously a beneficial factor. But the other thing is to recognize that the more people you have at your dining room table, and especially if you introduce people who are unvaccinated, the risk of infection goes up. So you have to keep those considerations in mind.
How would you say that families approach vaccination status when getting together?
I think the most important thing is really just have this conversation openly beforehand. You shouldn't be having this conversation when people show up at your doorstep. So mention it in advance. I've received a number of invitations to weddings and other events that have clearly specified that they're only going to allow vaccinated people there. So I think you just have to tell people that, you're concerned about the health risks of COVID-19 and just be open and honest about it. And I think most people are going to understand where you're coming from.
There is still limits for indoor gatherings. If you need to remind people, 10 people from different addresses or 3 households. So how would you suggest people navigate this rule that I'm sure many have forgotten about?
Yeah, so let's remember that that's a maximum. It's not a requirement. So you can have a smaller gathering than that. And the most important thing is keep the gathering small. So always respect the public health guidelines, obviously. But the point is, there is still COVID. Even though the situation is much better, COVID is still out there. So this is probably not the time for a large Thanksgiving gathering. Just keep it small, keep it to intimate members, and try not to invite too many people from too many different households, because number one, you're going to be exceeding public health guidelines. But number two, you're increasing the likelihood that you could introduce COVID into your party and then create a potential outbreak in your household. So just be a little bit careful about that. With a little bit of care and a little bit of caution, the risk from COVID should be relatively low.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Labos.
My pleasure.